The standard personality models that produce the big five, extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness, they were derived sort of with a primitive AI, that's a way of thinking about it, that looked for patterns of description across huge corpuses of linguistic data. How do people talk about each other? It turns out they talk about each other using 5 dimensions, and those are the dimensions I just described. But the people who derived the big five didn't use evaluative descriptors. They threw anything out that looked like a value judgment. So for example, you might say of someone, he's a good person, and you might say of someone else, he's a malevolent person. Those descriptors weren't included in the big five corpus because they were trying to derive a model of normative personality. But that meant that the pathological personality wasn't encapsulated or well defined. This guy, Robert Hare, who worked at the University of British Columbia as world's leading authority on psychopathy, interviewed hundreds and hundreds of psychopaths and was always fooled by them, by the way. And then he had a student, Del Paulus, who works at UBC, and Paulus developed a model of personality that was based on pathology, on the dark side. He called that the dark triad. Machiavellianism. So let's say if I was Machiavellian in our discussions, what I would have done before I came here, I thought, well, you know, what can Joe offer me? And then I'd think, well, how can I play Joe with my language so I'm most likely to get the narrow, impulsive, selfish thing that I'm aiming at right now? So that's how a Machiavellian operates. A narcissist, that's the next part of the dark triad, is someone who wants social status without doing any of the work. They want all the attention. If you're dating a narcissist or in a relationship with a narcissist, they'll alienate all your family members and your friends so that they get all the attention. And that'll just be the first of the games they play with you.
Yeah.
Then you have psychopathy, and the psychopaths are parasitical predators. And so the predator will take whatever you've got, and the parasite will live off you. Here's a parasitical ideological statement. Property is theft, a classic Marxist trope. Why would you say that? Well, if I want to live off you, the way I'm going to justify that ethically is by claiming, well, you know, Joe, look how privileged you are. You've got all this money. You just took that from the oppressed. And if I'm manipulating you so that I get some of your money, that's only just because, first of all, it's exactly what you did. And second of all, well, why not spread some of that wealth around? So that's Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, dark triad. They've expanded that recently to add another dimension that was missing, sadism. And the sadist takes positive delight in causing pain to others. And the lulz culture, L-U-L-Z, the lulz culture online is a culture of sadistic, Machiavellian, narcissistic psychopaths.
Lulz, meaning like people are joking around shit posting.
Yeah. I did it for the lulz, and it's the plural of LOL, laugh out loud. But if you look at the Urban Dictionary, for example, the definition of lulz is positive delight in the suffering of others. It's like, yeah, it's sadistic. And bloody well, social media just facilitates like...
I never thought of lulz as being sadistic.
In and of itself, it's not a sufficient marker. You have to have like 6 or 7 things going on before it's clear that you're manifesting this underlying tetrad of personality traits. Like if you use the odd acronym and you're throwing out a joke at someone, this is a habitual pattern of doing nothing but provoking people online and using deception and lies to do it to attract attention to yourself. You know, it has to be a very consistent pattern. But Paulos and his crew of researchers and people who've been influenced by him have laid out this 4-dimensional structure of the dark side, let's say. And they've shown that hyper users of social media, Instagram, for example, and people who do a lot of anonymous shit posting are characterized by domination by those 4 traits. This is very, very dangerous to our whole society. You got to ask yourself what keeps the psychopaths under control in the normal population. And the answer seems to be, especially on the male side, narcissistic aggressive men get put in their place by non-narcissistic aggressive men. And that usually has to do with something like the threat of physical intervention. You know how it is if you get a bunch of guys together. I can make a joke about you, you know, and I could even make a joke that sort of put you down. But the joke would have to be funny. You'd have to have the opportunity to reciprocate, and you'd have to believe that I was doing it in good spirit. Because if I just used the opportunity to, you know, stick the knife in, we're not going to get along with each other very long. We know that, and men know that when they talk to each other. And so part of what keeps dialogue among men civilized is the possibility that it won't be civilized if it goes too sideways. And everybody knows that. But there is none of that online because anybody can post anything about anyone, no matter how denigrating and derisive, especially if they do it anonymously. And there's zero consequence. In fact, quite the opposite. If they're good at it, they get a lot of attention and the social media companies will monetize it. And so not only is it not inhibited, it's actually facilitated. And this isn't a trivial problem because if the psychopaths multiply enough, they take the whole society out. I think virtualization enables psychopathy. It's worse than just the trolling bit. That's bad enough. because it pollutes political dialogue and it makes everyone think that everything is more unstable than it really is. But online criminality is actually a terrible plague. I don't think there's an old person in North America who isn't being targeted by some gang of psychopaths who's documented all of their interests and their locale and who knows how much money's in their bank account and who's doing everything they possibly can at every second to leverage access to it. Or they befriend them, they get it in, and some lonely old character who's not functioning cognitively quite like he used to gets sucked in by someone pretending to be his friend and offered a great investment opportunity. And it's very, very, very difficult to track this sort of thing online. So you get the real enabling of the criminals. If they're anonymous, how the hell do you keep them to account? And then a secondary derivation of that is something like trolling. And that's really not so good either, because if the psychopathic, narcissistic, Machiavellian sadists are dominating the political discourse, then ordinary people look at that and think, oh my God, everything's going to hell. Everyone's really extreme.